everyone. Welcome to this webinar on what MWC will teach us about 2025. And I have to start this webinar with some grim news. I asked our overlords in AI for help creating a musical theme for today, just as a little jingle to lead us in. It was jaunty tune to get people in the mood, but it looks like AI doesn't have such an optimistic view of where we're going in 2025, because it created a 4-minute heavy metal song apocalypse, complete with lyrics like bandwidth warriors waging war, telecoms giants always wanting more. So, if you're in the mood for some thrash metal about how satellites are going to be clashing and all this kind of thing, I will pop that on Telco Forge's website and the LinkedIn channel after the webinar. But, if you are less in the mood for a Mad Max style future, to get a sense of what 2025 is leading into, welcome to the rest of this hour. I'm joined by 3 keen industry observers who've been thinking about how to prepare for what the year is going to throw at us. Camille Mendler, Zahid Ghadiali, and Rudolf Moncrief all have their own areas of expertise, so we'll get them to talk to us a bit about where they're coming from. Rather than just gazing into crystal balls, though, we've got a real opportunity to use MWC next month as a lens to read the industry through. We know there's usually a flood of news that comes out from MWC, and there can be topics where the silence is deafening. And so with that in mind, I'm going to put the panelists on the spot. I'd like them to talk about their expectations for the year, but also what we should expect to see or hear from MWC if their forecasts are true, and also if they're false. And that way we can all tune our antennas a bit better for the coming year. But that might be a little bit easy for the panel. So I'm going to encourage them to stress test and question each other's ideas. And for those that are feeling brave, I'm happy to create a personal theme tune for the one who's able to argue best what you think is going to happen. I'm guaranteeing that the word apocalypse won't appear in that. But let's make things even harder for them, okay? I'd like to make sure that you in the audience all get the opportunity to send in your questions, disagree, and put forward your own ideas as well, so that we make sure that we're not just coasting what they already know. So if you send in your thoughts and notes through the Q&A, I'll pick up on that and weave that into the conversation as we go along. But with that said, to the conversation, I'll invite Zahid, Rudolf, and Camille to briefly introduce themselves and then share their first predictions. Zahid, perhaps we can start with you.
Oh, I thought it's always ladies first, but okay, no problem. So my name is Zahid Ghadiali, and I run a 3G, 4G. So 3G, 4G looks at, well, it started looking at 3G back in 2000s, and then it became 4G. But now I sort of look at infrastructure and connectivity, and 6G, which is the hot topic, and private networks. And I'm actually looking forward to see all of these things at MWC sprinkled with a bit of AI fairy dust. So I don't know, do you want me to go a bit more in detail, or you want introductions first?
Yeah, let's take the introductions through. Camille.
So I'm Camille Mendler. I'm chief analyst at Omdia in our service provider enterprise team. And what I do, it's all about the money. It's about monetization. So what I'm interested in is how we're going to make money out of this infrastructure, these services that we've got out there. And I'm actually going to be proselytizing at Mobile World Congress, and I'm going to be asking the same questions again and again, which is, who are you selling to? Do you know that they actually want this stuff? How are you going to sell this? Who are you going to be selling this with? And have you got a proposition that can actually be built? Now, these are very pragmatic questions, and I think they're ones that need to be answered. And so my prediction about Mobile World Congress's success or failure will be all around whether those commercial questions are going to be addressed, not another demo of network slicing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Camille. So, last but not least, Rudolf Moncrief. Can you
Well,
give us
you know, if it's not for you, it's definitely for me. I'll take that network slicing demo because what I'm interested in is more the infrastructure side of stuff, and specifically open and disaggregated infrastructure. So that's mainly Open RAN, but there's a bit of open transport and a bit of open core in there as well, although I think that's mainly resolved, and so I don't look at it too much. There's open Wi-Fi as well as part of those technologies, but I don't think you go to Mobile World Congress to learn about Wi-Fi. It's all about the RAN, and I'm looking forward to meeting as many of the vendors, hardware and software, some of the labs and testing facilities, and kind of get a pulse of what's going on in the industry. Is it dead? Is it dying? Like some people are saying, it doesn't feel that way to me. I think obviously with some of the larger vendors moving into the space, it feels like it's different to what everybody expected. It's almost like Goliath switching sides and going, "Hey, David, let's let's join forces." And it's not that David and Goliath story that everybody loves or seems to love anyway. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about where we are with Open RAN. It's such a huge ecosystem. There's at least 150, 200 companies exhibiting at Mobile World Congress, and many others who aren't exhibiting. So there's a lot there, and maybe who's going to thrive and who's going to struggle, I think will be a really interesting question, and the reasons behind that, I think will also be interesting. So that's what I'm looking forward to at Mobile World Congress.
Excellent. So perhaps then I can put you on the spot and ask you.
I should just. I'm Rudolf, and and I'm the editor of Open and Disaggregated Infrastructure News, Odin, and so I write a little bit about this and kind of focus mainly on that. I should have started with that. I'll remember.
Yeah, one of those details. Yeah. So Rudolf, when we're talking about where you see the industry going, obviously you've got a very particular viewpoint there. For 2025, you're talking about this convergence of David and Goliath. So what are your expectations? And then, again, at MWC, are there particular things you'll be looking out for to verify that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, what are my expectations? To be honest, I think it's dangerous going in with too many expectations, because otherwise you're going to find what you're looking for. But I think my expectation for 2025 is, we've come off 2 very difficult years for the vendors. There's not been that much purchasing. Report after report saying, there's been a huge drop in spending, and it looks like it's going to start picking up in 2025. So it'll be interesting to see who gets, who's going to start winning contracts. How open are some of these Open RAN networks and Open RAN ready networks that are being deployed at the moment? We saw some very positive noises from AT&T at the tail end of last year, who are integrating Mavenir radios and Fujitsu radios along with Ericsson. And there were 2 more small cells. I can't remember who it was again. I'll have to check. But there are some more small cells being integrated onto Ericsson's SMO platform. So it'll be interesting to see, like, if there are any more that are going to come along, and who they're going to be. Be very interesting to see how some of the greenfield deployments are doing. So Boost Mobile in the US is one of them. 1&1 in Germany is another that's been struggling a little bit, kind of to turn a profit. So they're really I think both they're kind of dependent on other arms of their business to kind of stay afloat. And Rakuten, who seem to be through their Symphony division winning more and more contracts to help operators transition towards Open RAN. I think a test will be very easy. when we go to MWC, we'll find out how market ready are a lot of the radios. Which platforms do they work on? How many kind of software platforms are being deployed and adopted? So the RICs and the SMOs, is it all actually coming from a handful of vendors, or are there other things going to come through? And then, if there are any kind of deals announced with some of these radio vendors being integrated into Open RAN deployments. I think the other really interesting area is private networks. It's a big opportunity for a lot of the vendors, but whether or not that materializes is something completely different. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear from Camille about this, because I think from what I've seen, operators aren't so good at selling to enterprises, and especially the kind of enterprise that would purchase a private 5G network.
And you think the vendors are better at it?
Absolutely not. I think it's we take it for granted. There's this whole thing, digital transformation. We've been talking about it for ages. So for us, it feels like, but the reality is it's barely begun.
Well, again, I refer you to the money. IoT was something we were talking about a few years ago, and how much is that actually worth for telcos? It's less than 5% of their revenues. How much do you think private networks is worth for telcos today?
Oh, probably less than 5%.
Maybe not even 1%.
Yeah.
It's less than 1%. So we may be excited about private networks, and I think there is some opportunity there, but let's be qualified in what we mean. And it's not because they can't sell well. That is one issue, but it's a bit broader than that.
I think there's a lack of awareness of what private 5G networks can deliver, but also there's just this. People are people, and people are used to doing things the way that they do them. And the reason why digital transformation is so slow is because most people still use Excel in ways that it shouldn't be used. They still use, you use.
Maybe in telcos, but I mean, as with APIs, by the way, no one said that API word yet. I thought we'd be talking APIs and AI. APIs are something that come through into the telecom industry every 5 years, and we get all excited about it. And then there are statements about, well, people don't understand these APIs. Enterprises understand APIs rather well. It's about making them, palatable, a reason to buy. And then you have to wrap that up in a commitment, which is a value proposition, which our industry is not good at. That's the issue, which is the same with private networks, I would argue.
But if I was going to make one
bold prediction, not the tech.
Yeah, but if I was going to make one bold prediction, said something, it would be. I don't think it'd be too surprising if a major Chinese vendor dips their toes in Open RAN. I'd be really interested to see what would happen then. And they might even need to just say it's Open RAN ready. And I think that could be an interesting development. So that's what I would like to see.
So just I'm sure you already know that ZTE was already very active in O-RAN Alliance, and I'm not sure if they're still very active, but it's like there is nothing stopping them doing Open RAN or O-RAN compliant interfaces, but it just doesn't make sense. So it's the example I give to people is like you go and buy a printer, and in UK you get an all-in-one printer for like £100. Then after some time you go and buy a cartridge, and each cartridge is £50, and you think like, wait, the whole printer was £100. Why is one cartridge £50? And it's the same thing. So you buy the whole thing, like really everything cheap, and then you realize, oh, for every license key now I'm paying probably more, or every upgrade it's a lot more, because that's how you do it, right? Different business model. And I'm not saying that it's only the Chinese vendor who do this. The other big vendors do it as well. So it all like what is your business model? And the whole Open RAN thing, you know, it sort of creates a problem with this business model. So you have to sell it at an upfront high cost, and then the integration activities which used to be bundled in the long-term cost is now upfront. So it sort of creates a problem for the operators, and this is the challenge, in my opinion.
That is a very striking one. So, I mean, my question actually kind of relate to some of what we've already been talking about, and Camille, maybe this is a good chance to sort of bring in some of your take on this. But clearly, things like private networks aren't really much of a money spinner for the big telcos, but there is an opportunity there for people aside from the traditional to join the market.
It may not be a money spinner by itself, but it brings in, if you can think of it as a service wrap, there are, in fact, sort of the enterprise part of the business, that B2B side of business, is finally on a modest growth trajectory if the industry as a whole. And there are certain telcos that are actually seeing some absolute growth. I mean, 2/3 of telcos last year saw growth in their sort of the B2B market, which is enterprise is about 30%, wholesale's about 10 to 13%. So there's growth. Profitability is another thing, but there is growth. And it's not just private networks, it is services associated with that. It could be managed security. 9 out of 10 people who buy a private network buy security. So security is like a nice, increasingly a money spinner for the service providers. So you've got to think about not product, but customer lifetime value. It's a different way of looking at it. It's a portfolio sale. And so some telcos are getting that and selling more effectively. And so they're on that growth path. And some have actually moved away from connectivity. There's a group, not a large group, but there is a small group of telcos that are already making more than 50% of certainly their B2B revenues beyond connectivity services, which is intriguing. A lot of it through acquisition, by the way. Whether they're doing profitably is another thing, but we'll worry about margin management later, right? Because the hyperscalers don't worry about margin, do they? Not all of them. I mean, the market doesn't care as much about that. So maybe telcos could be viewed in the same way, judged by the same financial metrics. I don't know. Just a thought.
Do you have any? Is one? I saw a company. They do a service for telcos where it's video surveillance as a service, and basically the way it works. But they sell it to the telco, so the telco is actually selling it onto businesses as a value-add service.
And they get a few points from that. So that's not bad.
And all you do is you buy a camera from that company, you just plug it into the private 5G network, and all of a sudden you have AI analytics over the top. I thought that was quite cool. And
the more you add on, the stickier the customer is, the more you can layer on more things. Again, the customer lifetime value grows and everybody's happy. And so, I think one of the things, we go back to Mobile World Congress, the thing you need to watch out for is who's partnering with whom. And I think you'll see that telcos, though they've been promiscuous in the past, and I don't think that's stopping necessarily, there are going to be some sort of deeper alliances with certain organizations. Would you agree with me? Vendors that can help them at different layers of their business, and that, maybe even with the go-to-market as well. I think that's something we need to watch out for. That's one of my expectations of Mobile World Congress, actually.
I think that's a really nice prediction. So you're saying basically, so companies who are active in different verticals, and then they can kind of like cross.
Well, for instance, I mean, there are some organizations, I mean, like let's say the HPs or the Accentures that have power across and capability across different industries, but also different parts of the service provider. So there's a multi-layered engagement that you could have. The relationship is not just sell to, it's sell with. It could be, re-architecting some of their operations. So that type of engagement, I think, is more interesting to service providers. And I think it's why people like Huawei have done very well, because they don't just help build, they help run, and they're helping with selling. It's no surprise to me when you look at lots of the awards and some of the innovation, particularly in my neck of the woods on enterprise, that you see, Huawei with, a Chinese operator with real examples of what they're doing with a private network or with AI or whatever, because they're thinking about the whole life cycle. And that's the type of engagement I think we need to see more of. And by the way, I do think that other vendors like the Ericssons and the Nokias are doing that too. But we see a lot of really successful examples coming out of China, I think.
I think oh, sorry, go for it.
I just wanted to touch on 2 points very quickly. So one was the camera one. And, think of camera as just another device with SIM card. So you don't even need a private network. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, Vodafone is already doing that in UK. So, you can buy a camera with some SIM in it, and, you can actually monitor it. So the main advantage of that one compared to the wired one would be you can put it anywhere and you can move it around. So, you put it on one part, like, if something is going wrong on one part of your premises, and then you can move it around, once that problem is fixed. So you don't have to have too many cameras. But the challenge with this one is the camera system as such has become so cheap, connected with Ethernet and Wi-Fi, that this has sort of become expensive. So like earlier, this used to make so much more sense. Now you think like, well, I can get a system for, I don't know, maybe 200 pounds, I'm thinking. And, it's just the connectivity part is free. Whereas with that camera, you have, so it's more of an OpEx thing. You're thinking, do I want to pay, 20 pounds a month, right, forever?
But that's the consumer view. And from a business view, if you're a small business or even to a larger organization, you've got more connected devices. You want someone to manage that. And you know what some of the smarter telcos are realizing? Oh, I'll get into this LAN management as well as the WAN, and then I get all of the action here. So there's still money to be made.
And the other thing I wanted to touch about was private networks. So I think for private networks, there has always been a misconception that telcos are the one going to sell private networks. It all depends on what an enterprise wants, right? Or what an industry wants. And you don't have that kind of an expertise at telcos. So one approach is like telcos partner it with someone, but then you want a dedicated network, and telcos don't really have a role to play in that. You can say like, well, we can give you roaming and interconnection and all, but you don't really want it. Sometimes you just want to stay in your premises, right? And there are lots of small companies. So digital warehouses is a big thing, and I've been following it for a while, where private networks makes a lot more sense because Wi-Fi isn't reliable. So it's reliable, it's but sometimes you have all those scanners, and I've seen examples like when you are scanning and you move between two Wi-Fi access points, sometimes it can take up to around 25-30 seconds to reconnect. And you don't have these problems when it's cellular enabled. And why 5G? Why not 4G? Well, it's just because the spectrum which is available is so much more convenient for 5G. So there is no specific reason why it can't be 4G. But when you're talking about C-band, which is the spectrum most commonly available, well, I say C-band, but 3.8 to 4.2, or in some countries maybe 3.4 to 3.6, it's so much more convenient for 5G, and that's what is driving 5G.
Actually, this made me think of something quite different, which is going to be big at Mobile World Congress, which is this. We've had this vision for a long time of like anywhere connectivity and seamless connectivity. I don't know if seamless is possible, but anywhere connectivity. And now we're willing to play with the satellite people. The satellite people, those NTNs. I don't know why we say NTN. Why don't we want to say satellite? I don't know. Maybe because lots of satellite share options, were lining people's bird cages a few years ago. We want to say NTN. It sounds sexier.
I think we're addicted to that.
But my point is, it's coming back, and the telcos want to play with satellite because it's coming to this seamless connectivity piece. So Mobile World Congress, there's going to be a lot more of that, right? I think that's one of our predictions, and I think it's a good thing, right? As long as we're not investors in any satellite companies.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because that sort of area is something that I've been looking into not long ago, because talking about NTN is the idea of seamless connectivity and getting it everywhere is not new. We've had that ever since 3G pretty much, or people talking about fixed mobile convergence.
So it's been bullshit for 20 years. We might actually be able to deliver it now. I mean, that's exciting. That's worth talking about at Mobile Congress, surely. Get the champagne out.
I would
The
agree.
carver.
Exciting. The striking thing is I was asking a sort of bunch of sort of C-level and SVP people from around the industry about this not long ago. I put out a report maybe last week, and the overwhelming opinion is it's not about the technology or anything like that, and it probably never has been. It's problems getting the business case to work and the incentives to change. So very much to what you were talking about a bit earlier, Camille, with all the wrapping. Because NATO, for example, did a exercise in October, and they sort of had people all connecting onto a common core from different countries, different people, and one of the guys was saying it was messy, but it worked, and it wasn't advanced technology. We can make this happen if we need to.
Now, I just wanted to jump in there, and some good points actually on the question, Upkar. I take those points on board. I wish there was an option to just give a thumbs up on some of the questions, but going back to the seamless thing and all, and you think from the 3G days, I remember seeing an early Iridium presentation, and I have a feeling it might be somewhere late 90s or early 90s, sorry. And it was about like, well, you would have just one phone which works on satellite once you're outside cellular. When you are in cellular coverage, it works on cellular. When you go in your house, it works as your landline. So, it can and if you are in the office, it basically works as like, the internal enterprise thing. And that's such a long time back, right? And I was still in university, and I didn't have the technical knowledge, but I'm like, that sounds really good. That's the future. And I'm still waiting for that future, but hopefully 6G or maybe 7G can, do that finally.
I hope there's no 7G, but Nikola Tesla predicted this, I think like in the 30s or something like that. There's this great Nikola Tesla quote about everything being connected. It's obvious. I think this question, whenever I hear like, oh, the business case isn't right, in brackets, to connect this area that's unconnected, I think it's maybe maybe they. I don't know. I find that such a poor excuse and such a poor reason to not do it. And I think that there's so many examples where operators thought that there wasn't a business case to do something, and then they went and did it, and it turns out it was a great business case. Just they didn't realize all the other stuff that would contribute to making, to kind of that would have a
funny.
positive
It's amazing if you talk to customers, the end users, what you might discover, which again is what I want to hear more of at Mobile Congress. I listen to my customers, and I've decided to launch this service, and we're going to price it in this way. Anyway.
No, I agree. And an example of where they didn't do that, for example, is the metaverse, and an example of where maybe they're doing it in the right way. I've been reading about how in places like Thailand and China, there's this differentiated service for streamers and video game streamers where there's a really, where they're charging for excellent uplink basically, and that as a premium service. And you wouldn't have done that without speaking to the customers, but you definitely would do the metaverse stuff without speaking to the customers, because it was just another one of these very hype cycle things, and everybody kind of went in on it, or at least used the terminology. I don't know how much money they put behind it, but yeah, I think the business cases, they're a bit complex, and just hiding behind that as a reason not to connect feels lazy.
Rudolf, how do you define metaverse?
I don't. No, I think extended reality. I think lots of interesting things, but I hope we don't end up in a scenario where everybody's wearing glasses and having their eyeballs bombarded with stuff. Already, I'm hearing, because with the in-ear stuff.
Didn't I tell you I'm recording you on my glasses?
Oh dear. Well, long live the
I'm
future.
recording everything everyone's saying. I'll be analyzing it later.
You're going to put in an AI and no, but I think the business case specifically. I always think we always seem to forget that operators, they get their licenses for spectrum on the provision of minimum coverage requirements that, as far as I know, have never been met, because the business case. But ultimately, if you're not connected or you've got a poor connection, and it happens all over Europe, there are places with terrible connectivity. I don't understand how we justify this as an industry. That doesn't make sense to me. And if the business case is weak for that specific deployment, that means your overall business case is weak, because you're depending on one part of your business to pay for the other part of the business. But your obligation is to provide coverage, because that otherwise people are being left behind, businesses are being left behind, and then what happens? Like, people, what you just have to move to somewhere where there's good connectivity. That doesn't, I don't know.
I mean, I think you're bringing up another important point that's coming up again and again in conversations that I'm having, which is a move away from pure connectivity to quality of experience. I mean, I'm on the edge of London here. I'm in London, but right on the edge. And frankly, my 5G is not great. And you'd have thought in a major, world capital it would be. But what's really important, I think, going forward, when you think about all this technology that we've got in place, the networks that we've got, and I know from consumer surveys that we've done, and I'm sure others have done, and enterprise surveys, there is a willingness to pay for better quality of experience. Quality on demand is something that the customers will pay for, right? But this industry doesn't actually know how to deliver it, or even describe how it's delivering it. We're still speaking a primitive language consisting of 5 nines. It's up, it's down, it's on, it's off. And that language just does not line up to what we need to do as an industry to make money from the services, from AI and other things. That's one of my big things, my big worries about our industry right now. I mean, you might disagree. Tell me. I mean,
I'm curious as to how you'd see that change, though. I mean, are you thinking in some of these models that people have talked about, where you can, for example, maybe buy an extra speed boost or something like this, which is still to some degree a digital thing. It's either boosted or it's not. Or are you thinking of something a lot more granular?
I mean, the speed boost is the starting point, if you're allowed to. And then, I mean, there's a whole discussion about whether net neutrality is going to be something that continues or not in various countries, if that's consistent with that approach. That's a starting point. But I don't think we have an understanding of what good or indifferent performance looks like. If an application is performing badly, that can be as relevant as an outage, and we don't think in the right way. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. So we haven't even got the language to describe performance. You guys are nodding, so you must be agreeing, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that a lot of the issues that you're raising are once again they're using an upcoming technology to try and say, oh, this time we're going to solve it. And because a lot of stuff that you're saying is like Open RAN, they're like, well, with the RIC and with R apps and X apps, we're going to solve exactly these things. Or with AI, we're going to solve exactly these things. And so on the one hand, I'm a bit cynical that that's actually going to happen. But on the other hand, I have seen there are some really interesting things happening, because also I think that one thing we do forget with mobile is that the network is kind of like alive, and there are all these external factors that can affect the quality of service. How many people are there? Is it cloudy? Like the quality, what kind of glass you're using in the building. All these things, they have an impact. And there are companies like, there's a company called Groundhog Technologies, and they use a thing called they use chaos theory geolocation. So basically they use chaos theory you need AI to do this, right? So kind of see how the environment is affecting the signal so that they can locate people really accurately, even if they're like, you know, on the 15th floor of a 40-story building. And those are kind of methods and technologies that can actually help to achieve and solve, you know, achieve these results and solve some of these problems for operators. So it'll be interesting if some of these things actually do happen, but there are some promising signs, and I think same thing with the R apps and the X apps and the way that they can dynamically manage the network. There's a lot of promise there. Again,
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to be negative, because I think there are things happening. And I was just thinking about, there's a company called Domos. Have you come across them?
no,
And
I haven't.
they're doing work with Orange amongst others, and they talk about a concept called quality of outcome. So there are some interesting things happening. But you know, I'm at the monetization end, which means a description of a promise in a contract that triggers a payment. And we haven't gotten to that bit yet.
Yeah,
Not well enough.
I am enjoying this conversation, but I am also slightly aware that, you know, Rudolph and Camilla, you've both been able to just to give some predictions and so on. We've been letting Zahid off a bit light at this point. So, you know, it would be good to turn to him and sort of see, you know, both where you see the industry going this year, you know, what your predictions are, and what you're going to be looking for at MWC to test whether that's accurate or not.
Well, as I said in the beginning, so I'm looking for the sprinkling of AI fairy dust on everything, but specifically on technology side. And I know this is a topic most people don't like, but I'm looking forward to a lot of 6G demos. So, you know, everybody can say like, oh, why do we need 6G? Let's delay it a bit. Let's think about it. But in my head, it's sort of like quite clear how it's going to be done. I did a training as well. I think one of the biggest challenges of 5G, especially the 5G standalone, has been the core, right? But the core is sort of like in a right shape to be used for 6G with, you know, some just new network functions. So I'm hoping to see a lot of 6G demos. Private networks is an area of interest. I want to see some private networks, you know, demos. So I've seen a lot of use cases. I write them about them on my private networks blog. But it would be good to see, like, you know, what new things are happening. And of course, there is a lot of AI in private networks too. And there is open RAN based private networks, but they're not sold as open RAN because like the end user doesn't really care. You know, the enterprise doesn't really care about open RAN. But the solution integrator, you know, they are being able to buy kit from different vendors, put it all together, and there is no RIC right now, you know. So it's something like, well, you know, you'll have RIC and you'll have apps which can do optimization on the fly, which can do some positioning support and things like that. But then there is this private networks, believe it or not. So open RAN, well, we think about not open RAN, IoT. We are thinking about just the cellular IoT, but there is a lot of things going on in LoRaWAN. You know, there are Bluetooth based IoT. There is some new standards and all. There is Wi-Fi 7, right? Wi-Fi 7 is here. It's sort of perfect. And, you know, we are not thinking about it because we are so cellular focused. But for indoors, Wi-Fi is perfect. Now, somebody can show me a demo of this thing called wireless wireline convergence, or sort of like a fixed mobile convergence kind of thing. That gets, you know, all my thumbs up because the technology is there, the specifications are there, it can be done. But operators are thinking like, well, what's in it for us? Because we can already do voice over Wi-Fi, and that's what people need. They can do so voice over Wi-Fi and SMS. They can do indoors using what we do with IMS, and data we don't really care. But if you want seamless mobility between indoors and outdoors, you know, including things like VPN, and in future when we will have the real extended reality, you know, kind of thing, we want to be able to support this WWC or wireless wireline convergence. So these are some of the things which I want to see. I will be very surprised if I see more than one, like, of these demos, but like, hey, we have to be, thinking about all these things. I don't know what I'll end up with in the end, just taking a picture with some infrastructure. That's what I do every year.
Yeah. So uh, picking up on that maybe a little bit, we've got questions coming in from the audience, and relating to your most recent comment, Zahid. So is 2025 the year that MWC operators and policymakers finally take indoor wireless seriously? I haven't scrolled down to see who that question has come from. I can have a guess.
I know. So I think the challenge is it's the operators who have to do it at the end. They have to deploy the features. You need some kind of support in the devices, and there isn't something which is compelling them to do it. It's good to have, because I always say, if you make access, so we are talking about the access network, right? Independent of, like, the core. So it doesn't have to be cellular access, right, with the core. Then what happens? You can even replace that. So I'm thinking about Wi-Fi right now, but you can replace it by even Bluetooth. Or in future, you can have this thing called, everybody keeps talking about Li-Fi, right? Or light-based communication. So you have to create that independence, and that's going to be the best thing for everything. So satellites, when we're talking about NTN, we are still thinking about, well, is it just going to be like a bent pipe, so it's relaying the same information just on a different frequency, or it's going to be like regenerative, so it decodes the message, then it encodes it and send it again. But make it independent, so even the proprietary technologies which satellites might use, they can work with the core. Something like that. This independence is very important, but there isn't really a compelling enough business case for it right now. And I don't know whether the regulators or the policymakers can actually compel the vendors or the operators to do it.
I mean, one of the points that you raised there is to do with those device manufacturers, and they always seem to be one of the sort of key stumbling blocks when we have bright ideas in the industry, but nobody is, for example, putting antennas in the phones for another few years or that kind of thing. So that said, do you expect to see? What would you like to see? I'll ask the panel, from the device makers that would create any significant moves in the industry this year. Are there things that we should be expecting to be including other than this sprinkling of AI fairy dust? Is that what's going to solve the issues for the industry, or is that purely a consumer play?
If I don't have an answer for this, but I know during April Fool's jokes, which we don't do right now, it used to be very common. There used to be some really good ideas, and I always wish somebody would actually translate them into reality. And I'm not saying it will happen this year, but like one of the ones, and this is from T-Mobile in the US. It was like this one guy in the bath, and he had like an attachment on the head with the phone here. So so you can do things with some kind of like a head mounted thing with the phone. So you can just look at your phone, like whether you're doing a video call or you're doing just call in general, but it's not a hands-free thing, right? So you can be doing video call, but you can be watching video. And I wish there was more ways to make all these fun gadgets, but that's not the question you ask. But I just wanted to say that.
I don't know enough about handsets, but it does feel, in all these discussions about, okay, what technology, we want everything to just work on everything. somebody's going to make a sacrifice for that to happen. So who's that going to be? Because, you know, ultimately, service providers, or the handset, everybody wants to own part of the customer. And so if you're just, if you can just connect to anything all the time, who's providing that, and who's the customer, who's the service provider in those scenarios? And I think it's, you know, that's part of the obstacle. And not to mention that clearly there's a lot of valuable real estate in a phone, and so they have to make decisions about what they're including. And so battery, until they solve batteries, you know, maybe one day if we get really tiny batteries, then they can put in loads of sensors and loads of things like that. And I don't know, but it feels that there are obstacles to making it happen, and mostly it's self-interest. And I don't know how a regulator would do that. I don't want to criticize regulators too much, because again, it's quite specific things. But it does feel like a poorly regulated market in any case, across the board. Again, even just because if we go back to what I was saying before about universal service obligations, that's not enforced, that's not encouraged, it's not even discussed. But you know, the way a lot of the spectrum auctions have gone feels short-sighted in hindsight. And you know, maybe the not letting the market consolidate, you know, having so many operators, is that the right way? Is that optimal? But we're not even close to resolving any of these questions. So how are we gonna solve indoor wireless when everybody's got Wi-Fi and they're particularly happy with it and they're not complaining too much? So I feel it's like low on their list of priorities.
Yeah. Partly moving on from that, partly moving back, I am keen to make sure that we're addressing some of these questions. And there was one that picks up on what you were saying a little bit earlier, Camille, about the quality of delivery. And the question is, how would that be delivered? Is that the IP layer? Is that the radio? Does it matter?
I suspect it'll be a combination of methods, actually. I mean, low latency, low loss will play. That potentially is one approach because it reduces latency. Then there's, I mean, some people can think differently, but I think NWDAF has got something to offer as well in terms of giving control as well over performance, tunability over performance. So I think there are a number of different methods that could be used. Oh, and by the way, on the device front, of course, some AI processing, for example, will happen on the device, but it won't just be there. It'll be in a bunch of different places. So I think there's one thing, we need to have better observability is one of the foundational elements to have control over performance, which will improve experience. So I think all of those things need to be talked about more at Mobile World Congress. Hope I'm making sense here. And there will be a number of methods to improve that quality of experience.
So if I just remembered this, you know, the triple fold, so Huawei's triple fold phone, and because I've just seen the videos of it, and that's really impressive. So I don't know how thick it is, but that triple fold kind of phones can actually make a lot of sense as long as they are not too thick. So, you know, for most of the things, you use it as a phone, but then you can also use it as a tablet, you know, especially that would be convenient if you're taking down notes, which could be a bit tricky on my phone, right? Especially if I have to write a lot. But along with if I have some kind of a stylus kind of thing or a pen. Good. Yeah, and that can actually be really good. So I need to see, is it somebody else going to release a triple fold phone, and is it going to be the same kind of approach, or is it slightly different approach? But the main thing is, how thick are they? Can they fit in my jeans pocket? I think that's the main thing.
Is that the most important question at Mobile World Congress? When you get a nice new gadget?
Yeah, you know, it's
what it comes
important.
down to, I see.
In fact, it comes down to the size of your pockets, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
My father-in-law has a smartphone that's this big with a tiny little screen. It doesn't use any apps.
You know, I mean, it's lovely to talk about the devices and the stuff we've talked about, but the elephant in the room is the sustainability of the industry. We haven't even talked
Well,
about that.
energy
It's just like, again,
efficiency,
sustainability becomes sexy
financial
nonsense.
sustainability, or
Oh, I think
environmental
in its broader
sustainability.
sense, but consider if AI is the future to transform both the operations and maybe some aspects of monetization of telecom, we can debate that or not. There's going to be a lot of issues around whether it's going to be good for the environment or not. And that triggers all sorts of nasty political things. And you would have thought that somewhere like Mobile World Congress would be exactly where we need to talk about that. There are things people don't want to talk about, but must talk about. So I think we can't forget that too. So I hope there's some discussion.
They do have their government summit, but it's behind closed doors. And but it would be, I think some of those things are interesting. And there was a question: what impact would the proposed US tariffs have on the industry, especially Ericsson and Hope, and how will this affect the conversation at MWC? I mean,
considerably.
I don't want to get too deep into the politics. I think some of the stuff that's happening in America will be discussed a lot by everybody at MWC, and hopefully our American friends don't have to defend themselves too much, and we can have like reasonable conversations. Because, but I think I'd be surprised if that doesn't dominate. But I think that there are some very interesting geopolitics around these technologies. I think to your point, Camille, about fascinating, very bad discussion, very bad how we talk about the energy consumption of the RAN, about 1% of global energy consumption, and they're like, well, we're just going to AI it away, and very little discussion about, well, you're just shifting that energy consumption onto AI. So that feels a bit silly. And all the conversations around we needing loads and loads of nuclear reactors to build AI data centers, that doesn't sound like the best thing in the world, especially if it's true that you don't actually need all that processing power to get some of the results that are needed. But the geopolitics around chipsets, semiconductors, rare earths, GPUs, the way Open RAN is actually being used as a diplomatic tool in Southeast Asia and in parts and beyond, in Kenya as well, specifically to counter the Chinese manufacturers, and how we as users, consumers, get caught in the middle of these things. And it's easy for us in the West here with our Wi-Fi 6 and 5G and all this kind of stuff. But if you're in Cambodia or if you're in Madagascar and your government is being pressured by one side to use one technology and by another side to use another technology, and you're still waiting for 5G to be deployed, that's not helping anybody really, apart from people who think that they're shaping markets. And if we believe in kind of like innovation and open markets and all these kinds of things, we should be a bit more honest about what's going on with Open RAN versus the Chinese manufacturers. We should be a bit more honest about the fact, okay, yeah, you think that, look, there was a huge security breach in US networks, and it happened in a completely different way. It had nothing to do with the technology. It was a phishing attack, just like the majority of sophisticated cyber attacks. The fact of the matter is everybody's spying on everybody. So does it actually make sense to go, well, kick Huawei out? I think we have to be more reasonable about this. If we're interested in providing good quality coverage to as many people as possible, that's one thing. If we're interested in making as much money as possible and protecting our vested interests, that's a different thing. But let's decide which one we're doing rather than pretend. I would like some openness about that.
There are so many thoughts about
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, firstly, in terms of the sustainability, there is a whole bunch of challenges there, undoubtedly, and one of them is to do with the risk that operators take on if they shift dramatically, and to what extent their stakeholders will let them do that. I mean, as I think we've already referred to, the idea of becoming a utility and staying in a lane and making a decent amount of cash but not growing spectacularly or anything is a viable option. But it's a very different thing from what we tend to sort of think about in a dynamic industry that can grow and change and do all kinds of other wonderful things, and that the whole cost base would need to change dramatically. The and again, there's a piece on economic and environmental sustainability. Since about 4 or 5 years ago, there have been moves to try and generate key value indicators as well as key performance indicators, which could then be applied to all kinds of other elements. And one of the very striking things I've heard about that is that we may be able to use them to connect finally sort of societal and environmental and commercial sustainability, in the sense that if you can correctly assess, for example, the value of putting a cell tower in a particular remote site in terms of the additional business opportunities it will create, the societal benefits, reduces reductions in the sort of local healthcare costs, all this kind of thing, then you can start to make business cases for different forms of collaboration and so on that will get that to happen in ways which won't happen if it's just the telco on their own sticking a site in. So the problem with that is it's something we're not used to. The engineers in the business know KPIs very well, and while there is movement on KPIs, it's slow. I think that's something which could be exciting, but it's also very difficult. Now, I'm aware that we're coming up to time, and before we have to go, I would like to ask the three of you one final thing to wrap up, and this is, when it comes to MWC, is there a topic or a piece of news which you're really hoping that you won't hear, but which fills you with dread because it's almost certain to happen? I mean, for me, I have to say that would be the sort of annual opening keynotes of a number of operator CEOs getting up on stage and saying in a very long-winded way, the regulators don't like us, we're not making as much money as we want, and it's not fair. Perhaps I should hand that over to Rudolph first and see what he makes of it.
Whoa. Okay. Something. I mean, apart from a COVID outbreak, no. I think. I think something I don't want to hear. I think you're right. I'd probably go with that. Playing the victim doesn't help anybody, and I think these are big organizations. They're very empowered, so it would be better to hear like some positive messages rather that. I think, and generally same thing with criticism. I think when there's criticism, I think it's nicer when there's like potential solutions or avenues of solutions that can be explored rather than just the pure criticism. So I think the things I don't want to hear is just like stuff like Open RAN is dead. It doesn't help anybody or anything to say something like that. It's just a totally useless comment as far as I'm concerned. It's good engagement, it's good clickbait, but ultimately there are lots of people working really hard, putting a lot of effort and a lot of brain power and money into providing these technologies. Critique rather than just criticism is more interesting.
Nice one. Camille, can I ask you for some of your thoughts about what you would like to not hear this year?
I fear irrational hockey stick predictions about certain markets, certain market opportunities. because they become a distraction from the spade work that needs to be done about how you actually launch and monetize. So if I see some hockey stick predictions about aspects of the AI market, it's going to worry me greatly.
Thanks. And Zahid, can you wrap this up for us?
Yeah, so as I said in the beginning, I'm expecting everybody to just keep on talking about AI. But I hope that wherever people talk about AI, it makes sense. They don't talk about AI where it maybe doesn't make sense. So we have had in the past, like, people stick AI onto everything. So I wouldn't like to see any stickers with like AI inside kind of thing, So that's the thing I'm thinking, like, like maybe in the first hour, can we spot 10 AI signs, or as in 10 AI, mentions on booths and things like that. Let's see if we can spot less than 10.
I think we're going to be disappointed, guys.